Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Early Care Connection. I'm Izzy Greenberg. Today, we are joined by Ava Bermudez Zimmerman from the Child Care for Connecticut's Future campaign, and Meryl Gay from the Early Childhood Alliance is out this week. I would love to start by thanking Sandra for providing interpretation and just reminding everyone to speak slowly enough that she can communicate properly with everyone. We will use the chat for any technical issues, or if the community would like to communicate with each other. If you have questions for me or for any of our panelists, you should go to the Q&A, which is the better place for that information. That'll make it so that I can see it much more easily. All right, so today we are going to talk about the kindergarten age change law that has just been put into effect, and that will impact communities and families across the state this fall. We are going to focus on how one community is managing this change. We're going to focus on Middletown. That is my community, and so I know more about what's happening there than anywhere else, and I'm impressed with what's happening. I know that Middletown, we pride ourselves on being a community that has strong partnerships and strong coordination, and you don't notice that when things are easy as much, but you do notice it when things are hard and when there's challenges. And so this has been a challenge, as most of you know. But I think Middletown has kind of come to an interesting solution. And so I wanted to share that out with you all, partially because I'm proud, but also because I think it's interesting and there's a lot to learn there. So today we are going to focus on Middletown. The guests include our school readiness coordinator, a Board of Ed member, and a provider in our community, excuse me. So we're going to get started actually by having a presentation from Dawn Dubé, who is our school readiness coordinator. We'll then move into a little bit of information from Shelia Daniels, who is the chair of the Board of Education and also on the School Readiness Council. And then, and we'll also hear from Annette DeMauro, who is the program director at South Farms Nursery School. It's not all perfect, but it is interesting, and I think there's a lot to learn there. So just wanted you all to see this, not only because of the kindergarten age change, which is coming up in every community across the state, but also because I think there's some lessons learned here in how the various groups in a community can work together to solve a problem that could be siloed to one population without coordination. And I know you guys have very often said, I want to learn more about that. Who can I be working with? Share me information about a program that's going to make our program stronger. And so that's my goal today, is that you all learn something, if not about the kindergarten age change, but also just about how a community kind of tackles a problem together. Hopefully it's helpful to you. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Dawn Dubé, who is the school readiness coordinator for Middletown, who is going to give a presentation to start us out. Dawn, we'll turn it over to you. And thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Izzy, for having us. We are so grateful for the opportunity to share with the community of Connecticut. I will say, as a former kindergarten teacher, I did teach kindergarten for 10 years prior to becoming the school readiness coordinator. I was a strong advocate for this change, seeing the children coming into the classroom at very different levels of development. I've been a proponent of this. However, I was not a proponent of it happening this quickly. So we have done our best to respond. And we're looking at this as an opportunity to really do what's best for our youngest learners, and be responsive to the needs of our families and our community. I'm going to take you through a presentation. Feel free to add questions as we go through the presentation. And can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, as you likely are well aware, the birth date was changed from January 1st of any given school year to September 1st. So here we are doing all that we can to adjust to the changes. in legislation. So the first thing that we did as a community, like many other communities, is we collaborated with professional groups around the state. The RESCs offered many sessions where we could come together to just problem solve and brainstorm. How do we handle this? How can we make decisions around what's best for our kids in a situation that is really just moving forward so quickly? We all had concerns about the waiver process. And as you know, every community was able to do their very own waiver process with not much consistency across the towns. So we shared best practices, and we talked a lot about equity and how can we ensure that this process for families that want their children to enter kindergarten early is an equitable process. So we gathered information. I sent out a survey to families across Middletown just to get a sense of their thoughts on the situation, and using that information so that we could respond to the needs of our families. We continued, so it's been a very long 6 months of really looking at all of the moving parts. We held ongoing meetings with the School Readiness Council, which we do have a strong, as Izzy said, we have very strong partnerships here in Middletown. We've built strong relationships over time that really make a difference so that we can learn from each other. In addition, we had a leadership team at Middletown Public Schools where we talked about various solutions that could potentially resolve this challenging issue. We really focused on how can we alleviate financial burdens for our families. Knowing that from the survey, the majority of folks were expressing how worried they were about having to pay for another year of preschool. Even with school readiness funds, we know that that sliding fee scale can still be a burden on families. So we had ongoing meetings. We every year we do have a pre-KK database where we gather information from all of the programs in town. So we have a sense of exactly who will be entering kindergarten in the fall. And so we used all of that information for communication. So we have families' phone numbers and families' emails so that we could reach out to them just to be as transparent as possible that we're learning all together. We don't have a plan yet, but we wanted them to know that we were in the process of coming up with a plan. The database we use to really monitor the numbers very carefully. Every year in Middletown, we do have 1/3 of our families entering kindergarten who would not be age eligible based on the law. And that was the case this year as well. We found 1/3 of the kids with the birth dates between September through December. And then we felt it was really important that we just raised awareness because we were having families coming to us saying, we had no idea about this law. How would we have known? So we worked with our director of communications. We worked with all of our community providers. We connected with CHC, all of our partnerships, Child First, pediatricians, just asking and saying, please, let's make sure families are well informed that this is happening. And there's going to be some choices that they're going to have to make.
Just hold on, Dawn,
Yep,
just to
sure.
interrupt. CHC would be Community Health Center. And just a reminder that acronyms are tough for our translator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't say that earlier.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great reminder. Yeah, so we really wanted to make sure that every family, which can be very challenging, right, to reach all of our families. So we did the best we could really with an all hands on deck approach. We have wonderful family engagement liaisons that work in Middletown Public Schools. So they were also supportive with communication. And Sheila and Annette, please feel free to chime in if you have anything else to add about collaboration and communication.
I will just add, I just unmuted myself to add that I think it's really important to note that we really tried every avenue, including Dawn, emailing parents, actually calling them, texting them. So the outreach was at every level we could possibly think of. We discussed it at a Board of Education meeting. They invited me as the board chair to a meeting so that I could hear firsthand and then advocate for them later on. They had the superintendent fully on board with it. Their committee was diverse enough, with enough people that would need to be involved, giving the input. It was a really nice collaboration. They kept the School Readiness Council always abreast of what they were doing and took input. And with so many agencies represented at the School Readiness Council, that also helped them too.
From the provider's perspective, all that strong communication, it supported us tremendously with supporting the families and alleviating a little bit of their stress, with them knowing how in tuned and well informed we were about it, and able to sharing with them that, the goal is mutual, the support is there for them. I really feel that it put such a light burden on us to have to figure all that out, at the same time explain it to families with this change going on, because change is hard and it's hard to adapt to. But with that partnership, and as Izzy and Dawn and Sheila shared, that communication, it stayed open, it stayed current. Dawn was great. If our providers had questions, we reached out to her. She was very responsive in a timely manner, that the families felt really comfortable that, Middletown had a strong partnership and a shared goal for these children.
Thank you. So our first survey out to families in January, again, we just gathered information about what were their plans. And these were some of the things that we found out through this first family survey. We knew, like in several other communities, that families would be asking for the waiver. Families said that they may remain in preschool. Expressing the financial burden, several said this is not fair, this is not equitable. Two parents in this survey did mention, and one actually sits on the School Readiness Council, they mentioned the idea of a transition class. So at this point in the process in January, we were not able to say that we are absolutely having transition classrooms, because we hadn't made that official decision or had board approval, but it was just in continuous conversation as we were thinking about creative solutions to best meet the needs of these kiddos with the September to December birth dates. Okay.
We also had a forum that Dawn did online, and it was herself and Colleen Fitzpatrick, who was the early language arts person for our district, and our superintendent and myself. And it was a nice exchange with parents, and to Annette's point earlier about parents' stress and concern, it was an avenue for them to express that, to see us, and for us to see them, and kind of calm their concerns and let them know that we were truly working on a solution that would help all of us.
I think within that forum and throughout this experience is we're really just bringing more awareness to the importance of early childhood and the strategic investment that it is, which everyone in this group knows so very well. So we did, again, like the other communities, we coordinated several kindergarten waiver screenings, which we partnered with Middletown Rec. And we had the families come into this experience. We had teacher leaders and supervisors who were administering the waiver. The district chose to use the Dial 4, which is a comprehensive developmental assessment screening. We also included an executive function screening, so that we can really get a sense of students' executive function skills. And during to me, the most important part of these screenings was the opportunity and time to engage with families. So families brought their children, the children went in, they moved through stations looking at language, develop concepts, motor skills. And while that was happening, while the students were working with staff, myself or another team member were able to have conversations with families and say, listen, we are really considering this transition program. Should your child not make our kindergarten cutoff that the district had set, and would you be interested in that? And it was really scary for families, because families were interested, but they didn't have the details. And again, we're still working on the details. But with with trusting relationships that we have created with so many of our families, they were open to the idea and excited about that. So that gave us a lot of hope. 8 students were invited into kindergarten. Now at this time, again, we had a very, we were almost 100% certain that we were going to be offering the transition classrooms. And so with this other opportunity, we felt it's okay that very few kids are making the kindergarten cutoff, because we have this other opportunity that would allow them to get time.
I think
So,
too, I
yep.
think too, with that opportunity, Dawn, for the waivers, the feedback I
Yep.
got from families was that, we were truly invested to see where, well, you guys were truly invested, I should say, the individuals offering the assessments and the waivers process, that you guys are truly invested in seeing where these children fell and not just leaving them as a parent to decide that. So with some solid, feedback and solid evidence and assessments being done, I think it reassured parents that the decision that they made to either pass them on to the kindergarten or keep them on, I think it supported them. I think that was really nice opportunity for them to have some support behind them and some documentation to make sure that their child is ready for that transition program.
Thank you. And a lot of families were and naturally so, right? Families who had planned on sending their child to kindergarten were very apprehensive about them not going to kindergarten, and what could this new program look like. So the great news for us, so that we actually could move forward and really start the planning process and begin having real conversations with families, was on February 15th. The board unanimously approved the creation of these classrooms. And our board chair, Sheila, if you want to add, as you were instrumental in this decision.
Yeah, it was important to me as a parent of 2 November-born children. I held my children back. I was looking at the whole picture, and I think sometimes you're in the moment, you're looking at kindergarten, that they're ready for kindergarten, whether their birthday falls on March 1st or November 1st. And I was looking at down the road when my child, turns this age and that age, and sending my 17-year-old off to college. And I felt it was important to hold my daughters back. So that's where I came from. And as a board member, I felt it was most important to be looking out for what was best educationally and for the well-being also of our young children. And also in my experience working with the School Readiness Council, I was on the council for 26 years, I still am, but I also worked within the council itself when I was not on the board as a assistant. And in my work, we would talk about, as Dawn mentioned earlier, 1/3 of our children were born in this age range, and the impact of that. You'd be looking at a list and seeing a child who had a birthday on December 31st and was in school with a child that was a whole year older than them, and think about the impact of them and the readiness. And then you get to school and, are things developmentally appropriate for that child that's only 4 years old? Probably not. And with the demands of kindergarten changing so much and becoming so much more, and that's just difficult for us to expect a child to succeed and do well. And we want that first experience to be the best experience it can be. And I think that creating this program is doing that. And it's a win-win for everyone. So it was really easy for me to say to our board, I wholeheartedly support this, and I hope that you will too. And I was so pleased that they all did. And with our superintendent on board too, and speaking that evening, and also with the presentation that Dawn and some of her people did that evening, I think it made it very clear that this was a win-win. We were considering everyone. We were putting the child first, but we were also considering the impact on their family. And this did help them. We did have one challenge. I don't know if you want me to go into that now, Dawn, or we can wait.
Let's wait till it comes up in the
Yeah.
slideshow.
Yeah, go ahead.
But that is important. Yes, thank you. That is great. Okay, so then we began the design process. We have been working as a team at the district level and using all of the information and the great learning that comes from our early childhood community programs as well, in terms of looking at a space that is joyful, right? Bringing back the joy in learning, developmentally appropriate, play, inquiry, exploration, language, ensuring that this space is really set up to ensure that the whole child is being looked at. Family engagement is a critical strategy for student achievement in this program. Again, as everyone does so well in the community centers where you're engaging with families daily, and that doesn't happen as much when kids enter kindergarten, right? Things shift significantly. So we want to ensure that families are a really big part of this experience. And again, jump in if you'd like to. So we got to a point where we had obviously options for families. Families can continue, as it's in legislation, to seek that waiver and have their child screened. We've had 4, and we have a few other families who want their child to be screened for entering kindergarten early. Families, of course, family and choice is so important. Certainly, they can stay in preschool if they choose. In Middletown, we do have 1 Head Start classroom, so that's really our only free space. That a child can stay home, right? That's also a choice. And then the 4th is what we've been working on is for a child to enroll in this kindergarten preparatory academy. And so what was really important, so important, is again, wanting to make sure that families are fully informed of their choices, and getting the word out as quickly and effectively as possible. So we have the all hands on deck, ensuring people are informed, information sent out. Shelia touched on this too, through phone calls, emails, text messages. I've had some of the family engagement liaisons knocking on families' doors to see, did this family move? They hadn't gotten back to us. So we sent out a survey. I'm calling it a survey, but really it was a form where families had to accept or decline if they want to enter this program, and with limited but some information. So again, we're still creating this. We've come a long way, but we're still in the process of doing all of the things that are important, like making sure we have the right curriculum. We have created and made decisions around the sites so that we're going to have a classroom in 7 out of 8 of our elementary schools will have one of our transition classrooms. We've gone through the process where we've hired teachers. So it was a very serious endeavor, because we knew too that had all the children stayed in preschool, we would have lost approximately 6 of our kindergarten teachers due to low enrollment. So this ended up being a win-win on the district side as well. Programs, again, with our strong relationships, they were being supportive, as well as making sure families had the information to make informed decisions. And wanting to make sure that our programs had space for the new students that are coming, for the new children that are coming into their programs, for the 3 and the 4-year-olds. And so this may or may not be interesting to you, but this is one way that we've been tracking the numbers around the number of kids that are entering kindergarten, and then the number the kids that we had found that were not eligible. And then we've been keeping track of who is saying yes to the program. We do have some space available in other schools. So as families come in over the summer, there may not be space. We did decide to cap this at 14. So each classroom will not have more than 14 students in their classroom. One of our schools, McDonough, did not have space, so those kids are going to go over to Wesley. Any questions, or Sheila or Annette, did you want to add to any of that?
Is there, are you thinking about geography when you're putting kids in? If kids can't fit in, let's say, the Farm Hill one, which has no openings, are you trying to get them in the school that's closest, or they still get bused? How does that work?
That is a great question, Izzy, and that's one downfall to this in this moment. There is transportation. If they are in their home school, they have transportation. The kids that will be attending Wesley from McDonough also have transportation, but if a child comes in and their home school is filled, they do have to provide their own transportation.
Oh, that is tough.
That is tough, but we're doing our best. And this has happened already. This has happened with a couple families, and they have been great and have said, you know what? And perhaps so far we're just fortunate in this, where they've needed before and after care. And when we get to that,
yep,
it's just a moment, Sheila could touch on
and also they're used to providing transportation to a
right.
preschool. So it's not a
Right.
huge change for them. So, all right, let me not interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because we want this to be as fair and equitable as possible. And that is a slight barrier for sure. Okay. So just a little bit about what the classrooms will look like, a little more about that. We are going to have our teachers trained in parent-teacher home visiting model, which is through the state with a partnership that we have with Connecticut Family School Partnership. We're very excited about that opportunity to really strengthen relationships. Looking at the CT framework, again, making sure our strategies with families are high impact, just as they are in early childhood centers, looking at families as their child's first teacher, which is very important and is a mindset shift for some when you go into the public schools. Families having the opportunity to engage with one another. Middletown has a really robust system in terms of training families and staff in Circle of Security, parenting and classroom, which is an attachment-based model that really helps you dive into, and a lot of you are familiar with this, helps you dive into how you parent and taking a look at yourself. And we're very excited about having more offerings to support our families with Circle of Security and having volunteers in the classroom, of course. And some of the details that we have landed on with district support and with a team, again, smaller class sizes, which better replicates the ratios in early childhood. We are working to have a teacher assistant in each classroom. That is the plan. They'll follow the K-5 schedule, so the day will look the same in terms of when they arrive and when they leave. Looking at curriculum, when looking at the CTLs and kindergarten standards. So this is really truly a bridge. This is not a repeat of preschool. Everybody has new learning to do who will be teaching this, really a nice combination. And we've shared with families too, if you have a child coming to this program and they're ready to read, they're going to read. They're going to be met exactly where they're coming in developmentally. So kids can move forward and really be the best version of themselves. They won't be held back in any way. Support services for kids. So the staff that's already in the schools will be providing the special education services, transportation, as I shared, food, free breakfast and lunch. And then Sheila, do you want to touch on what was a big barrier for us and our families?
Sure. Little did we realize that because of the status of these children through the legislation, they were no longer considered school-age children. And the Y brought it to our attention that that would impact their program because their program was set up for school-age children. So currently, the kindergarten children that are in the WISE program right now, you've got children born between September 1st and December 31st. So they're dealing with the same group of children, yet because these children were considered non-school age, it made a difference for them, and they would have had to change their licensing, or we would have had to do some kind of work around that for them to have these children enter their program. And as Dawn mentioned earlier, with children going to preschool currently and then going to kindergarten, a lot of them would need before and after school care because parents are leaving earlier and working later than the school day. And that is the best, bridge for them as far as caring for their children during that time frame. So that became a real barrier for us. And we ended up finally connecting with the Office of Early Childhood and Beth By, and through her, and then my talking with Jeff Curry, a rep to the legislation, they worked around this, and all children are now allowed to be part of the Kids Corner program if they are in a program such as this kindergarten prep program that we have here in Middletown. So that really solved a hardship for parents. We had parents that were very excited about putting their children in this program, but definitely could not if their children were not eligible for the before and after school care. So we were really pleased that we were able to get over this little hurdle that we had in front of us. I think it does show, though, that while we found a way to comply with the mandate, the state wasn't as prepared as they should have perhaps been. And also there wasn't as much guidance. So we had to follow along and kind of tread the way and get assistance in that way. And we're very fortunate because we do have the YMCA folks, are a presence at our school readiness council meetings. They're familiar with everyone in the district. They know the superintendent of schools. So the collaboration was really good, and it did work out very well. And as I said, the families are benefiting from this. Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you, Sheila. Your persistence was so important in that. Okay, and most of these things I had touched on the final phase in preparation for our classrooms. As I said, we had identified at 7 out of 8 elementary schools. 91 students will be attending these classrooms. 9 will remain in preschool, and 2 of the kids who did meet the kindergarten cutoff actually chose this program instead. And that took a lot of conversations with families. And families really had to dig deep and say, what really is best for my child? And 2 of these families found that the gift of time for their children would be best. And so they made that decision. As I said, we interviewed our teachers, we hired them. We have our first family event coming this Thursday where families will come together and just have conversations and have fun, get to know each other. They're going to meet their teachers. Teachers are beyond excited. So 5 of these teachers were kindergarten teachers, and they are just really excited about the opportunity because they too have felt the pressure and the changes in kindergarten. We have made progress in Middletown and so many other towns as well. In terms of the focus on play in our kindergarten classrooms. But we still know that it's challenging and there's a lot of testing and it sometimes feels really stressful for our kids. So the thought of bringing the joy back and letting kids develop on their own in their own time really feels exciting and an amazing opportunity for us. We were fortunate enough that strong district level support, and there were some grant funds to purchase some new furniture, play-based materials. A lot of the furniture shows the importance of social emotional learning with flexible seating. We'll be planning professional development, looking at curriculum, continuing with our purposeful play. We have a wonderful, we work closely with Karen Gray, and that work actually also aligns in our community early childhood centers too. We all focus on the executive function and purposeful play project. And then we had talked a little bit about the Yale Child tool that Middletown has spent some energy and learning in terms of how to observe classrooms. And as we know, we measure what we treasure, and we treasure relationships and how important the mental health of a classroom is. So we do this in the community centers, and now we'll be able to do it in the KPA classrooms as well to ensure that the classrooms are mentally healthy for our kids.
Dawn, I think it's also important just to add that for those of concerned around promoting this in their district, the concern around is it extra expense? I think you have to look at it that the folks in their districts that allowed waivers for all their children, so all their children are in kindergarten, we're basically doing the same. We're just placing the children in this developmentally appropriate place instead of putting them in kindergarten, but we're accommodating for them. So yes, we have the same amount of teachers and the same classroom space. You would have had to get materials for these children if they were waived into a standard kindergarten classroom anyway. So we're seeing is there might be an expense differently, but I don't think it's as great an expense as people might think as a first, glance at this. And I think that's really important. I think that also Middletown was so fortunate to have kindergarten teachers be so excited about this program and want to be involved in this program. And I think that we have a great group of teachers that are just going to soar with this. So I think that's important too.
You do. Thank you.
So let's see. I want to give, I'm sorry, you're not on your final slide here.
Oh no, it's just an end slide.
So I shared all of the links from your presentation. And I shared the presentation in the chat for folks if they need it. I'd love to just invite Annette or Sheila if there's more that you want to add that might not have been covered, or a little bit more from your perspective. This would be a great time to do it.
I think from the provider's perspective, what successfully got us through this and the transition and the keeping up to date with the family, I'll stress again, is that wonderful communication in the partnership, as everyone stressed, and it does help. It does alleviate a lot from the providers with guessing and being able to serve the family, but most importantly the child with that transition as well. This is a change for them too, so it was an opportunity to help us have the child understand too, and put into perspective, who should we encourage to leave, who should we not, alleviating again some of the providers sharing that information with having the assessments available. I mean, it wasn't just solely put on the provider. Well, what do you think is what we got a lot of from families. Do you think they're ready? How do you feel about this? So having that assessment process, I think, was great. And it didn't put all of that stress on us and having to answer that question for the child, and best supporting them. There was evidence behind it. There was a transition period. There was support. So I think I can't stress enough, if anyone does decide to do this or continue with it, the communication and the support and the partnership that we had in it, I feel just made it so successful.
And I would just add that I wish that more districts embraced the concept of complying with the mandate. I know it's difficult, but I think it's easier than people might realize. If you have people that are involved, that are willing to explore it, I think it's much easier than you think. I think it's a win-win for everyone. The school district is winning, the parents are winning, and most of all, the student is winning. And I think that we really are showing an example of that collaboration and the impact of it. And that's what I'm so excited about. And that's why I would love to, that if this could be shared with everyone so that other districts would, buy into it and decide that, yeah, I want to do that.
And it wasn't that difficult on the provider's perspective as well. The slots were still filled, whether they were going to kindergarten or whether they were going to the transition program. Regardless, we were going to have a slot to have to fill. So I think that was a smooth transition for us with the concern of slots that providers might have. I can see how for a larger program, sure, that might cause a barrier with some of the toddlers transition group. I can't speak on that for our program. We didn't experience that, but we had slots left available. We did, as a program, choose some different options for some children that we felt socially, emotionally would not be able to support that class. And that's a decision we made per individual child, per program, I'm sure. And they'll have that opportunity. And we still have opportunities for new families to come in from the community and serve them as well.
So we have a lot of great questions here. We're going to start with Joanne had some questions from the beginning. Were there privacy issues in the community or pre-K programs? Did you need to address any privacy issues in order for the pre-K providers to share info with the school district? And this is related back to the pre-K database that's created every year.
That's a great question. And the answer to that is yes. Not with the school readiness providers, because this is what we do every year, and we do share information with some of the private centers. So some of the private centers, there was reluctance to share, and understandably so. That is a privacy issue. Sharing families' phone numbers and emails. So I would have the information ready. I would send it to the director. The director would send it to the families, and then the families would reach out to me. And
Right.
It can be tricky. We are connected with many centers that are also on the perimeter of Middletown, and we have relationships with them. But of course, there's some that we are not connected to. It takes a little additional work.
Right. So, I mean, let me just back up and say, right now, we're looking at this and saying, this is a really great program, how cool it is, right? But I know this was hard. This required a lot of stretching of partnerships. This required a lot of people in every aspect of this saying, challenging themselves to think differently about their siloed piece. So we're looking at kind of a rosy picture now, but I know that this really took a lot of people, and maybe a little bit less on the provider side, because as Annette said, I think the real stretching took place probably, my guess, within the school system, to try to figure out how could you possibly make this work, and how can you think about early childhood in a different way? How do you actually think about that bridge between what's appropriate for a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old? And it's not true that every school district is used to thinking that way. I mean, Dawn, you said we have really tried hard as a community to infuse play into our kindergarten classrooms. I don't think that's happening everywhere. And that hasn't, that has been something that happened over years. So in some ways, our community was a little bit more ready for this as well, because we've been thinking about those things. So there's a question, let's see, there was a question about that actually. So I was going to try to get to that one next, but no, now I'm not seeing
Izzy, if I could just add, though, I think it's really important to note that some of these things that are already in place and institutionalized definitely helped us. The kindergarten data base was in place. So community programs were used to that every year, us asking. And we do have, as Dawn said, we have outlying programs who don't want to share, but we still share our info, and then they have that contact. So I think that made it easier. And I think that there was just so much willingness to just go into this with an open mind and to see what we can do. Also, that one thing that I've been saying as a board member is that these children that are in our community, born into our community, are eventually going to be ours. So why are we not embracing that from the very start? In our family resource centers, that, the schools that we have them in, everything that we do, and in our collaboration as School Readiness Council with the greater community, we need to say that that's important for us to embrace that group and say, we want to include you now. So I think that this is a way of doing that and showing the example of that.
Yeah, and can you just for Dawn, maybe for a reference point for folks, how many children are we talking about? Middletown's a community of about 50,000, a little less than that. And an incoming kindergarten class is 300, 350. Is that roughly the numbers we're talking about here?
Yep.
So a third of that is a little over 100, roughly 100.
Exactly. Yep.
So back to that chart, we don't have to share the screen again, but of those 100 that probably, and I'm speaking in broad numbers, of the 100 who fall into the category of kids who are eligible, how many are participating in the program?
90%. 91 kids are participating. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there'll be more, and there will be more, but yes, that's where we're at.
Okay, I am just getting a message that I shared the wrong link. I just want to tell folks the link to the presentation is the incorrect link. I'm deleting it out of the chat. I don't know if that deletes it for everyone, but my apologies. I did not realize that Ava was translating this. And so I'm sharing out the better link now, which has it in both English and Spanish. So apologies to Ava and apologies to you all. I'm fixing that link now. The link I just shared is for the presentation that Dawn put together. Okay, what is the budget impact on starting the KPA? Or was it a wash since you were able to reassign kindergarten staff and classrooms?
That's a great question. And Sheila addressed that a little bit, right?
I don't have the exact, but I don't think the impact was very large at all. And I think if it were, I would have found out from the superintendent, because as every other district, we are definitely in a crunch and a bind with our finances. I think that if we had complied with the mandate totally and not had those children, but that's not the case. So you either waived the children or you created a program like we did. So in creating the program like we did, the children are being accounted for just as if they were waived. They're in the school district and we're taking care of them, and we have the teachers just as we would.
And so Yeah, Dawn, I think you had something you wanted to add. I'm sorry. There's a lot to manage here, guys.
No, I
Sometimes
think
I get a
there's
little overwhelmed.
yeah, and I think without speaking in too much detail that I'm not fully informed, but I do know there are some there were hopes that there could be more funding for these students from the state because they are not considered kindergarten students. So that is a bit of an issue, a barrier.
There's still a lot of outstanding issues in terms of
Yes.
how any program serving these kids relates to OEC or how it relates, excuse me, Office of Early Childhood or State Department of Ed, right? There's a little bit of a gray area. Who pays for these kids? Who pays for the aftercare? Who gets them in? You know, can they have waivers for like a kids corner, which is run by the YMCA, which provides before and after care in terms of dealing with licensing? Like there are still a lot of outstanding questions. And so the communities that are taking this on are in some ways working out those kinks by force, but that really does put a huge burden on the smaller communities who might not have, you know, Middletown's a kind of mid-sized, we're mid-sized statewide. We're not as big as a Hartford, but there's plenty of, I mean, we've got 169 municipalities. Most of them are smaller than Middletown, I would say. So they've got, you know, maybe not the resources to push as much as Middletown might be able to. We're lucky to have a school readiness council and a school readiness coordinator. So there's a bunch of other really great questions here I want to get to. What about children in the special education pre-K program with fall birthdays? Did they transition to the KPA? Are they repeating pre-K 4? Or is there a new integrated special ed pre-K 5 program?
That's a great question. PPT decisions, of course, but most, yes, they're coming to the KPA classroom and they'll have their services and supports right there within the school.
Got it. And that's within the school that they will be attending for the most part.
Correct. Yes.
Do you expect, and I know you showed us the chart, that there are a few classrooms that don't have any more space, kids will have to go to a different school. Over the years, I know as a person who worked in Middletown for many years on this, having a connection to the school your child will be attending is so vitally important. I'm curious if you guys have thought through any ways either for those children's families to, I mean, you get attached to a school, I guess is what I'm saying. You go to a preschool in a school that's not your own, you get attached. Did those kids get the chance to apply for a waiver to be in that school? Is there any way to integrate them into the program just emotionally, like with visiting days or something, into the school they will be attending? Has there been consideration at all of how to then transition those kids out of their now school-based KP program or into the school that they'll actually be attending? I guess I'm just curious if you've thought about that at all. And that's kind of like the next level. So you might not have.
Yeah, we do have to be future focused though. And so those questions are really important and valuable as they come up so that we can keep that on the agenda and to discuss. No solid plans on that, but it has come up as a concern. And I will say that those kids that are going to another school, and right now there's only few, they do have to sign off on a form saying that they understand that this is a 1-year experience for their child to be at KPA in another school, and then they'll return to their district school in kindergarten. But the transition piece is so important. So we absolutely will consider that and try to come up with some ways. And obviously, if they have siblings at the school, that lends itself to make things a little bit easier in terms of them going into the school with siblings. And yeah, we're open to ideas on that.
Sure.
But I think you can also think about what's currently happening. So we have pre-K at Snow School, Spencer School, and Bealfield School. So if your child could be at Snow School and be going to Farm Hill for kindergarten. So it's a similar thing, just like if they were in Annette's program, they're transitioning. And Middletown, does have a transition program for children from pre-K to K. So I think that while if you look at it just as is how you presented it, it looks like a challenge, but then on the other hand, children are transitioning anyway.
Yeah, of course,
I think
you're already doing this.
Yeah.
And I think the kindergarten teachers, part of our transition program for Middletown is the kindergarten teachers coming into programs and having an opportunity to see these children and make a connection anyway. So putting that face with a name before the children even transition lessens their anxiety as well, and gives them some support with becoming familiar with some faces and not just going into a new environment, not knowing anyone.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Okay, there's some more questions here. Will you offer this annually, or is this a one-time event since this is the adjustment year for the new legislation?
I
Maybe.
hope this is something that this is year one of many, because I think it's really important to address the developmental issues of that age group. So I'm hoping that this is the start of something that will continue.
Yeah. Annette, does this feel like something that you would support being a permanent thing? Would that have any impact on your, I know this one year, it for sure would have an impact if those kids all have high community programs. But how would you see this moving forward if this was a all the time thing?
I mean, as a provider, I praise this, the integrated classroom, the interim classroom before transitioning over. I think it's a great opportunity. I hope it does continue. I hope it flourishes in other towns as well. I do think that this is what is needed for that transition period for these little guys and
Yeah.
girls. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for the children as well as the families. There's a lot that coming from a provider perspective and into a public school setting, you're not only supporting the children here, but you're also supporting the families with that environment. The public school environment is very different from ours. You don't get that one-on-one with at drop off, or that connection, or that visual connection between each other. A lot of it is through emails. A lot of it is connecting on the phone or through the dojos. So it really prepares them too for what the public school setting is like. And us particular at our program, we think that relationship is really important. If you have that strong relationship and that parent knows how to adapt to the public school setting and has that extra year to do it, I think that connection and that familiarity would help the student in their learning as well.
Right. And I mean, nobody here, well, some of you, but few of you know me outside of these calls, but my work for a very long time in Middletown was in sort of supporting programs like this. And one of the things that I always felt was really important was to what you're saying, Annette, parents, we have a lot of young parents, and when we have a lot of parents in Middletown who did not themselves have a good experience in school. And so it's scary. It brings up a whole new, there's a new level of anxiety for those parents bringing their kids to a place where they themselves may not have had a good experience or may not have been successful. And so a program like this creates a little bit of a helping hand for that integration, also of helping the parents overcome some fears that they might have had. So I think that that's also another aspect of support that we can offer to parents.
And let's not forget the huge barrier for some of them with this prospect of mandating that they don't attend school is the financial burden. And we're relieving that financial burden. They expected that their child would go to kindergarten, and their child is going to school. They're just going to a different kindergarten program. And we're accommodating their child's needs, and we're also supporting them financially, what their expectations were at this time and place.
Sure.
Okay. That was a very big component too, like Sheila expressed, was the financial aspect of it. I mean, it was a no-brainer for some families who find it to be a hardship. And although there are funds being offered to us, that was one of the strongest feedback we got regarding this program. It was nice for these children to have a quality educational experience, and even more so for them not to have the burden to pay for that. I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity to continue with the quality of learning and allowing these children to have that opportunity and at the same time not have to pay for it. I mean, I think that's a wonderful opportunity for families.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. We have a couple of technical questions here. Can Middletown count the children in their October count for the State Department of Ed? Did you have to get any SDE approvals?
October count?
Yeah,
The October 1st enrollment, I think they're referring to.
Oh,
That's right.
yes. Okay, Sheila, do you want to take that one?
I'm actually not sure how this is all going to fold out.
Yeah,
Um,
if the superintendent was on here, we would have him express that. So if we can get back with that final answer, I don't
No
want to speak.
problem.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Listen, we
Yeah.
could have had 10 other people on here. There's so many perspectives and so many people involved. So it's okay. You don't have to be able to answer everything. What about the larger cities in Connecticut? I know not your area of expertise, but the question is, Care for Kids stipend is not enough to have the child all day. So is there a relationship between your funding and Care for Kids? Is Care for Kids able to support these kids at all? Not has that is
Maybe
not
for the after school program care, they could apply for Care for Kids if there's any expense for that, but
right. Okay, well, another open question, which is fine. And a similar one, which is, can the classrooms get school readiness funding?
No, I would
No.
say, I don't think, not at this time. That's what I would say, not at this time.
Right. So for Middletown's, I know our school budget is tight, and oh, Candace is chiming in. Thank you, Candace.
Nice. Thanks, Candace.
Is the person who runs our the related programs at the Northern Middlesex YMCA. So, and she says we plan to have them apply for Care for Kids for Kids Corner, which is the before and after care. So, so that's great. Thank you for that answer. So our budget's not, we don't have a ton of money to spend, but you're basically counting on Board of Ed funds to cover everything. You're not anticipating that school readiness, Care for Kids, whatever else is going to cover the cost of any of this. This really is just Board of Ed is figuring this out.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so somebody's saying, is this only going to be implemented in Middletown? I mean, listen, this could be implemented in every community to some degree. I mean, not every community has the same structure that we have. Middletown already has an existing school readiness council, which I think makes it, it gives you that first step, because you already have kind of an integrated model where community providers and the school district and the city and advocates and parents are getting together every month to talk about what's necessary for, well, I don't know how it works in other places, but in Middletown,
Well,
every
in
month we talk about
Middlesex
what's
County,
best
though,
for,
we have the school readiness early childhood group at network in every one of our towns in the Middlesex community, Middlesex County. So that's beneficial for Middlesex County, and perhaps other counties could try to consider doing that.
right. So we have a leg up, is my point. Middletown has a leg up. It was a little easier probably to start a program like this because we already had some of these pieces in place. A lot of the people who would need to be participating were already in relationship with each other. And so I think that is a good thing. But part of why I wanted to highlight this program was both to say, if you hear anything that sparks something that could be useful in your own community, it might even just be a piece of this, but also to kind of show what a process looks like for something like this, because in the future, you know, these kinds of things come at us when we're not expecting it. And so it's nice to know what the process is. Also, I wanted you to understand kind of what the process is. Okay, let's see. A lot of kudos in here for considering equity, you know, considering the families, thinking about, let's see, I'm just looking at the shows the importance and value of school readiness councils. Absolutely. You know, great focus on equity. Good that you're considering transportation. Of course, there's still those few who that's going to be a problem for. So, you know, good jobs coming through. I know this has been challenging. Someone says this is great. I wish this was implemented in many other counties, such as New Haven, which has higher populations. I mean, absolutely. You know, but I think this is also just a good case study for what is possible. We'll see how it goes. And I think, you know, this time next year, it would be really fantastic to have you all back to look back and say, what did we learn from this? Because, you know, right now it's looking pretty rosy. We feel like it, you know, we've got a lot of bases covered here, but we might look back and say, wow, we really didn't consider this one aspect. And that will help us, of course, in future things. I would love to just let you guys kind of give any last remarks, things we may have forgotten. Annette, should we start with you? What, you know, final impressions before we end the call? Anything that you want people to kind of keep in their mind, things that are ongoing challenges that you may want to address? Anything we missed?
I covered both the collaboration. I support the program. It's wonderful. I am sitting down with our staff. There is going to have to be some revamping on our setting with individualization and planning, because there's going to be that 5-year-old spectrum now, right? Where those that might be remaining in our program, that we have to individualize and plan a little bit higher on the ELDs and the assessments with the dots for the age range. But other than that, I think it's a wonderful program. We've not hit that many barriers with it. And again, I'm gonna praise the connection we have with the Board of Ed and Dawn. And I have not hit that many barriers. We had questions from families, you know, the unknown. We were able to address them as they came along. If not, Dawn got back to us in a timely manner. So I do give much praise to the behind the scenes people that had to collaborate all this and go through those milestones for us. But they did it so well, and they supported the providers so well that I did not struggle here. I felt well connected to families. I felt, because we had such information readily available, or were able to retrieve it, that they respected and trust us in this process. So the only thing I see changing right now is the planning, but that's could be revisited, and it's not that hard. And the L's and the dots are very self-explanatory, and we feel that here in our program anyways, with seasoned staff, we'll be able to accommodate those children that are staying, and best planning for their goals and their development as well.
Thank you. And,
Yeah.
you know, it also occurs to me that, you know, in the Middletown, as I said, had some pieces in place that helped. We've been talking a lot about helping not just kids, but parents transition. As I said, we've talked a lot about moving to a model of integrating more play in kindergarten, of really doing education around parents as a child's first and primary teacher. There's so much groundwork that had been laid. Dawn, I'm curious, as we wrap up, what are the things that we've done over even the last 10 years that, you know, don't go into too much detail, but what are the circle of security? What are the things that to you have had, have set us up to be ready for this kind of a challenge?
Yeah, it's everything that you've said, Izzy, and especially the strength of the School Readiness Council and the partnerships that we have with not just the school readiness providers, but with our Head Start programs, with our private programs, with the school district. So we've worked really hard to build strong relationships and to learn from each other, right? I think we all have to stay super open-minded to, there's so much learning to be had from everyone everywhere. And even the collaboration between our kindergarten teams and our community providers, those visits and systems that we've built that came out of the School Readiness Council have really bridged the understanding and the compassion too around what everybody's dealing with. Because we all have different kinds of barriers. And we're all here for the same goal, right? We are all here to support our children and families. And so in terms of some of the specific programming, yes, Purposeful Play Project that we started, I think 6 years ago, and it's been a slow implementation, but has grown. And for us to also have that in our community centers has been great in terms of alignment. And our leadership in Middletown has always looked at, and thanks to you, Izzy, you've done a lot of this work with advocacy for us. We are so fortunate that we look at early childhood as a strategic investment, because it is, right? Because it is. And how can we support our families? In one way, circle of security, and there's so much more. We have PLTI here, and we have plenty of work to do. But yeah, we have a lot to build on. So I appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah,
I'm very fortunate, and I learned from the other all of the people across the state as well. I'm fortunate because I too get to meet with the liaisons that were the other school readiness coordinators, and all the communities have different strengths. So I want to stay connected. I want people to learn from this, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are plenty of other communities across the state doing really interesting things. You know, everyone here knows me as in this role, but I actually do other stuff too. And this is a little window into some of, I don't take credit for this program, but a little bit of a window into the kind of work that's happening, you know, in my community. Annette, before we go to Sheila, Annette, there's one final question here for you, which is, are providers worried that next year, and I think this is really the elephant in the room, are providers worried that next year there will be 100 less pre-K children in the community programs? If the average is 300 children and this year is 200 plus 100 academy children, next year is 300 and how many academy children? But am I wrong, but the math is not right because it's 300 plus 100 because it was an unusual number, or is it 300 minus 100? Mm. At any rate, so there's the math question. And then there's the question, you know, Annette, would you be worried for the future that you're going to have? Does this program feel like it will be competition to you or complementary to you? Not this year, but in the future.
I feel it'll be complementary because, you know, we will always encourage the program and versus a third year in our setting. I will always encourage our families to transition over into that program, which I don't feel it would alleviate any slots from us. I just feel that them transitioning over to that program will allow us to have the same slots anyways, because they would have been going to kindergarten if we weren't losing them to that program anywho. And I think that it will still allow us to have the opportunity to continue serving others in the community equally.
Yeah, and actually I'm curious if this program moves forward, if you're able to continue it in a next year, would it just be for kids who have those September, October, November, December birthdays, or would it be open to all 4-year-olds? Because that would change the dynamic, right?
I think with the children coming in at 2.8 though into programs too, or the 2.9, that it kind of balances it, because if you're allowing to come in a little earlier with that birth age, if programs permit that, I don't know how everyone works, but or allows that, but with that age being earlier to transition into it, for my program anyway, I do not see it being a hardship on us.
And I don't see this going down to a 4-year-old born before September 1st, because the program is complying with the mandate. So that's where I'm looking at it from a board perspective.
Right. Okay.
Someone did put a good question too, Izzy, in the chat, and that's a wonder that we have as well, is will they adjust the preschool entry age at some point to align with the new kindergarten?
Right. Because that is still a misalignment in a way. Mm-hmm. The 2 years, right. It assumes it's sort of it. Yeah, I get it. Yep. See my gears grinding as we're talking. Someone asked, I came in late, but did you address the merge of Care for Kids, School Readiness, and Head Start? We actually didn't talk about that. We talked a little bit about Care for Kids being able to be used for before and after care, School Readiness not being able to be used for this program. But how do you consider that with Head Start? Is there may not be an answer.
I'm not sure what the question really is, though.
Right.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's right. This impacts the Head Start program in the same way that it impacts the other community providers, right?
But I don't see it as such, because those children would have been going off to kindergarten. So if you look at our neighboring town of Cromwell, they're waiving all their children. So all of those children that would be 5 years old are going to kindergarten. So they're leaving their preschool program. So I don't see it as such. And when you leave to go to kindergarten, you're opening up the door for those 3-year-olds to come in. And if we keep those children in a pre-K program, then we don't have that opportunity to get those younger children enrolled.
Right. All right. So Sheila, I promised you a wrap up. Is there anything
I would
else
just
you'd
say
like
that although, you know, it might all look very rosy, I think it is because our norm is this collaborative approach that we have in Middletown. I hope that we can continue it and I hope we can grow it. But I do think that it's easier than people might think it is. And I do think it's very feasible to do. And I would hope that Middletown's approach to this could possibly be a model for the state. on how to integrate this in as best you can. And I hope it's successful. I have all the confidence in the world in it. I think it's a win-win, like we said earlier, for everyone, for our parents, for our children, most of all, and for our school district.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so Joanne addressed that last question a little bit. CT early start legislation, which merges school readiness, state-funded centers, and state Head Start, doesn't go into effect until July 1st of 25, and we don't have any details yet. So thank you, Joanne, for helping us fill in the blank, and also for all the great questions you asked throughout this. I would love to end on this quote that was put in here, which I love. Let's see, where did it go? Now, of course, from Margaret. John shared this from Margaret Wheatley. There's no power greater than a community that knows what it cares about. Not a direct quote, but a paraphrase, and I think that is true. There might be some barriers here, and Ari is putting many other towns are at a much greater disadvantage and are facing many barriers. I mean, that is true. You know, Middletown is a really interesting place, and in some ways a good model for the state, because in terms of, you know, we have a community that economically is eligible for universal free lunch. We also do supplement for some of our schools, but we're not a wealthy community, and we're also a community that has, you know, Shelia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's over 50% of the kids well, we're not doing eligibility the same way, but that are considered kind of that eligible for free and reduced lunch income level. We are also a community with an incredible amount of not just income diversity, but also racial and ethnic diversity. We are a majority, the majority of our community are students of color now, and that has been actually quite a transition in the last 20 years, where those factors actually, it wasn't that those weren't the same demographics 20 years ago. It's been a kind of a rapid change in our community. And I think that also mirrors a lot of state demographic changes. So we're working with a huge range of income, a huge range of different backgrounds, and really different, because we have a very large geography and 8 elementary schools, hugely different cultures, depending on which part of town you live in. We have some parts of town that have a lot more advantage, and some parts of town that have extreme disadvantage. And in some ways, each of those tiny communities is almost a microcosm of the different communities in our state. The lowest income census tract in Middletown mirrors the lowest income census tracts across the state, and the highest income ones are, you know, certainly not, we're not Gold Coast level, but if you cut them out, you know, and so we're thinking about this community with a rich diversity of people, of families, of backgrounds. We have a huge immigrant population. We have a lot of Spanish speaking families. So there's a lot to consider here. But you're right. There are a lot of communities that have a greater disadvantage, both in the populations they serve theoretically, but also in the lack of partnerships that certain partners may be willing to even have. You have to have a superintendent who prioritizes early childhood, or you have to have community folks like me who are constantly pushing the superintendent to focus on early childhood. You know, and so there's, one or the other. Anyway, thank you so much to our guests. Thank you to Annette. And thank you to Dawn, and thank you to Shelia. It's always a pleasure to work with you. Candace, thank you for chiming in. We really do have a terrific partnership. And when things are hard, we all work hard to try our best to fix them. So it's a pleasure to be in community and in this work with you all. I am very grateful to you for being here, and hopefully folks learned a lot today. Transitioning quickly, I want to just give Ava the opportunity to offer any announcements that she may have. Ava, you are up. Oh, hold on one second. Let me fix it. Ava was helping with interpretation, and I need to turn that off for her. Okay, all good to go.
Thank you. I'm on live here. Just a reminder again, for those who do participate in the Early Care Connection and Child Care for Connecticut's Future Coalition. I know not everyone is involved in all of the advocacy groups that we are that exist here in the state of Connecticut. But the Child Care for Connecticut's Future Coalition is going to be holding a series of ice cream socials, conversations with legislators. And if you want to host one at your child care center, your child care space this late summer, early fall, let us know. So I'll continuously make this announcement for the next 2 months so we can prepare those dates with legislators. But all of these wonderful conversations and our guest speakers that spoke today, there is direct connection between these laws and your lives, right? The kindergarten start age did not happen in a vacuum. There are a multitude of conversations, and in preparation for any other future changes, it's always helpful if we come in on the ground floor, and that means starting with a conversation with those who have the power to make those changes happen.
Thank you, Ava. I know this community has done a lot of work advocating for the kindergarten age change to happen over the years. Some have fought for it to not happen. In this last year, we fought for it to happen better because it was implemented so poorly. And so, right, this community actually has had a lot to do, even with today's presentation and your advocacy efforts. So you are so right about that. Okay, thank you as always to Sandra for providing interpretation for us. Thank you to Ava and to Meryl. And most importantly, thank you to all of you here attending, because you're, of course, the beating heart of this whole community. And that's that. So have a great week. Next week, next week we're talking about, let me just tell you before we hang up here, LISC. Is coming on to talk about the CT early learning facilities assessment. And so, I know we've talked about that in the past. And so we're gonna have them on to discuss that. Tune in, and we'll see you all next week at 9:30. Thanks. I'll keep this open just for 1 minute so folks can continue their chat. I see people are putting contact info in. All right. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.